to me way.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of The Shanty Show, the show about shanties. I'm here with Pressgang Mutiny. My name's Tim.
Hi, I'm Stefan.
I'm Richard.
I'm James.
And today we're joined by Jim Mageean. And we're all, I think, personally excited to speak with him today because he has had quite an influence on all four of us. And I think it's fair to say, in one way or another, he's one of the reasons why we do this, why we got into this. And I can say personally, recordings that I listened to of his when I was first getting into this material is kind of a bedrock for me. Not just him, but some of the other great people he was singing with and learning from during his career. So yeah, let's get started.
Goodbye, me sweetheart, goodbye, me dear-o, bo-ridey-ho, boom-a-lang. Goodbye, me darling, goodbye, me dear-o, bo-ridey-ho, gone away. The rain, it is raining all the day long, bo-ridey-ho, boom-a-lang. The northerly wind blows so strong, bo-ridey-ho, gone away. Goodbye, me sweetheart, goodbye, me dear-o, bo-ridey-ho, boom-a-lang. Goodbye, me darling, goodbye, me dear-o, bo-ridey-ho, gone away. Cheer up, Mary Ellen, and don't look so glum, bo-ridey-ho, boom-a-lang. Come white stocking day, you'll be drinking hot rum, bo-ridey-ho, gone away. Goodbye, me sweetheart, goodbye, me dear-o, bo-ridey-ho, boom-a-lang. Goodbye, me darling, goodbye, me dear-o, bo-ridey-ho, gone away. We're outward bound for the Bengal Bay, bo-ridey-ho, boom-a-lang. Bending me boys, it's a hell of a way, bo-ridey-ho, gone away. Goodbye, me sweetheart, goodbye, me dear-o, bo-ridey-ho, boom-a-lang. Goodbye, me darling, goodbye, me dear-o, bo-ridey-ho, gone away.
Cheers, Jim. And thanks for joining us on the show today. We're thrilled to have you. You're our first overseas guest on the Shanty Show.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, brought together through the technolo magic of the transatlantic cabling and the internet. So good to see you. So good to see you again. I know I first met you when we were at Folk Week in Whitby in 2016. I still have a little book in my collection.
Right.
And I know that James goes back a little bit further with his inspiration from your singing. So I'd love to talk about what you do at Whitby. I'd love to hear a bit more from James on his history listening to you. I know that Tim has been listening to you from way back and kind of refers to a lot of your songs as the gold standard shanties that we base some of our work on. So we've got a lot to cover, but before we get into all of that, from our perspective, we'd like to get a little bit more on your perspective and talk a little bit more on where it all started and uncover a little bit of the history for us, please.
Okay, right. Well, I've been singing shanties almost all my life. I've been singing all my life. Started at the age of 2. And so some people say, oh, that's not possible. But I've got a 2-year-old grandson now and he's singing. Anyway, my grandmother used to sing to me, and I learned a lot of her songs, most of which were folk songs. And in the days when I went to school, I went to just a little village school, I came from a mining village, so just to show how small the school. The school had 2 classrooms, so it had 5 to 10-year-olds in one classroom and 11 to 15s in the other classroom. Left at 15 in those days, and it really was a very, very small village school. But we did do singing, and we did have a folk song book called Whitaker's North Country Songs, a little red book, and so we did learn folk songs at school. And then when I was about 8, I think, I was in a school play, and I had to be a pirate in the school play, and so they asked me to sing Billy Boy in the school play. The teacher must have recognised that I had a loud voice, I think, and so I was chosen to sing Billy Boy in the school play. So that was my very first shanty at 8 years old, and it sort of went from there. Later, I used to, from 11 years old, I was involved in a village concert once a year up on in Lindisfarne, an island off the Northumberland coast, Holy Island we call it, but the proper name is Lindisfarne. And because I qualified as poor of the parish, that is, I came from a poor family that couldn't afford holidays, and this was a Catholic school. So we got free, the children, that is, got free camping holidays. This proper camping holidays under canvas, without a ground sheet and anything, you know. So it was quite rough, but it was a week's holiday up on Holy Island. But at the end of the week, with each tent, there was 6 boys to a tent. Each tent had to put on a performance for the village, in the village hall for the concert. So I used to always volunteer to sing something there. I wasn't too shy in those days, although I did become a bit more shy later on in my teens, I think. So I started singing. I sang quite a bit then, and then when I was 15 years old, I started to go to local folk club. A pupil that I knew at the school, he told me about. He said, "Oh, I go to this folk club on a Thursday night, and it's really good. And Johnny Handel sings there, and other people, you know, Luke Hillen, and they were all residents then, you know." And this was in 1963, and so I started to go to this folk club on a Thursday night when I was 15, and drinking copious amounts of Guinness, even though I was 3 years underage. And 2 of my teachers were always there, but they never said anything. They just put up with the fact that some of the kids from the school were at the back of the room drinking. But and so I listened to great shanties from Luke Hillen and Johnny Handel and people like that, you know, and saw some amazing singers, because the Bridge, it's, I think, probably the oldest folk club in the UK. So it started in 1958. And then there's 1 or 2 other clubs that claim they've been around as long, but we're in the same room. We're still in the same room. It's from 1958. We've not really moved. We moved downstairs for a while into the cellar and then moved back up again. But so we're still in the same room. And so I'm still going to that club. I'm probably the oldest attendee now, been going there since I was 15. So quite a long time. And I didn't start singing. Then I became quite shy, and I never used to offer to sing. And so I went for a long, long time before I actually plucked up the courage to sing, and then started singing shanties there, and became known as Shanty Jim. And everybody would then ask me to sing a shanty. And I only sang shanties in those days. You know, although I knew other songs, particularly my local Geordie songs, you know, the northeastern songs. But I only sang shanties in those days, and I just got this, you know, given this title. So Shanty Jim, here's Shanty Jim, give us a shanty. And so I then started to up my repertoire, and you know, by then, shortly after that, I met Stan Hugill. So when I was 16, the folk club, the Folk Song and Ballad Club, this is in Newcastle, at the Bridge Hotel, Johnny Handel, who ran the club, decided to organise a bus trip to a folk festival. I'd never been to a folk festival before, and I was 16 years old and raring to go. And so we set off in a bus very early in the morning from Newcastle. It's only about 90 miles, less than 100 miles away anyway. And so we got the bus and filled the bus, and we went to Scarborough Folk Festival, where everybody in the world seemed to be booked there. All the big performers at the time, the Spinners and the Young Tradition and the Watersons, they were all there. But Stan Hugill was there, and so this is the first time I'd seen him. and I saw him singing on stage with this, backed by the Spinners. And I had come across him before because in a year before, when I started going to the folk club, I used to buy a magazine. They used to sell a magazine on the door, and the magazine was called Spin. And Spin was basically a Spinners fanzine. The Spinners were hugely influential on folk music in general, but shanties in particular, in the UK. And so everyone, on the folk scene in those days, in the early 60s, loved the Spinners. And but in that magazine, and the Spin magazine, there was an article every month, sometimes 3-4 pages long, illustrated by this man Stan Hugill, and the article was called "The Bosun's Locker." And in it, this was 63, so this was 2 years after his book. But the shanties that he put in the Bosun's Locker were ones that he had omitted from his book. He had forgotten to put them in, so he was making amends by putting them in the Bosun's Locker. And so every month I got that and avidly read the Stan's stories and descriptions and new shanties that he was unearthing. And by then I had the book. So I didn't know of Stan Hugill before I saw him in the flesh. But this inspired me in Scarborough to write to him. So I wrote a letter. Of course, I didn't have his address, but I wrote a letter to Spin Magazine, to Stan Hugill, care of Spin Magazine, Liverpool. And and it got to him, and a week or two later I got a reply, and we started corresponding, even though he was, like 40 odd, 50 years older than me. We started this correspondence because I was such a avid shanty fan, and ended up, after a few years, I invited him up to Newcastle where I lived, and invited him to come and do a lecture tour and some concerts and folk clubs and things. And then he stayed with me in I shared a house with other students. I was a student then, so he came to stay in the squalor of our student house, and ended up having to put me to bed because we got very drunk on a bottle of rum, and I lived in the attic, so up 3 flights of stairs. He had to haul me up 3 flights of stairs, singing shanties as he did so, because I'm afraid I couldn't handle my rum very, very well. Still can't, actually. But
unreal.
Anyway, yeah.
my head, speaking of spin, my head is spinning because we got Young Tradition and the Scarborough Festival and Stan Hugill at your house carrying you up the stairs after a bottle of rum. I wanted to ask, was there a particular moment? Do you remember what happened to get you from that shy, 15-year-old kid in the club that didn't want to sing to being Shanty Jim?
I put it all down to the bridge again, because what used to happen, often they had a guest, and they had huge guests. But my preference was for the singers' nights, because when we didn't have a guest, they would get a group together and they would just sing bang, 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 one shanty after another. And that was amazing. And that I think that is where my love of shanties really came from, listening to those guys singing these incredibly powerful songs. As I say, I was too timid to get up and join them, but I would join in lustily from the back. I always stood at the back of the room. I was trying to keep out of sight of my teachers, I think, and hiding my pint of Guinness under my coat. I think it was really that, the shanty sessions at the bridge that really hooked me. And then meeting Stan, but I don't think that there wasn't no Damascene moment, but I think just gradually the shanties wore me down, and I had to do this thing. I had to learn as many shanties as possible, and so that when I did start singing, I had a good store of shanties and could sing with the rest. I remember 73, which is a few years later, being at Sidmouth and a Sidmouth festival, and a guy was running shanty session there, and there was 2 shanty sessions in the week, one on the Tuesday and one on the Thursday, and the guy was called Mike Price, and on the Tuesday he went round we sang a shanty, and then he went round the room and everybody sang a shanty, and I sang a shanty, and then he sang another shanty and went round the room again, and less people sang, and then he sang a third shanty and went round the room again, and very, very few people sang. And then he said, well, I only know three. Does anyone know any more shanties? And I said, I sort of put my hand up. I was 673. I'd be in my very early 20s then. I put my hand up and I said, oh, yeah, I do. And he says, how many more do you know? And I said, so about 150. And he just said, you're running the Thursday shanty session. So he then retired himself. And so I ran the shanty session on the Thursday in 1973. It was in the boathouse, it was in Sidmouth. And then this guy in the audience came up and he says, oh, my name's Dave Jones. He says, I run a festival, Bromyard Festival, which is one of my favourite festivals. He said, I run a festival in Bromyard next month. He says, will you come and do this here, this shanty session that you're doing? Will you do one of them for me? And I said, oh, yeah, I'd love to do that. And he said, how much do you want? And I travelled from Newcastle. This is about a 300-mile journey each way, and I didn't drive. So I said, oh, £15. I thought £15 sounded like a good sum, So I actually hitchhiked from Newcastle all the way down to Bromyard in Herefordshire and hitchhiked home, a 600-mile round trip for 15 quid and did a shanty session, and I've been doing it ever since. So like Whitby, that was 73. I started singing at Whitby at 73 as well, and so I've been running the shanty sessions at both of those festivals for nearly 50 years, maybe 50 years in 2 years time, so 48 years. Been doing both of those,
Yeah. Now, I think we would be remiss not to drill down deeper on your connection with Stan. Obviously, any shantyman worth his salt has this on the bookshelf.
Mm-hmm. I just also want to point out here, interject. I was able to find.
You've got the Bosun's Locker.
Yeah, the Bosun's Locker. So it is available if you can dig a little deep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll just mention that we brought that out. Well, not me, but the publishers brought that out for Stan's 100th birthday. What would have been his 100th birthday because he died in 2006. But so we had a 100th birthday for Stan in Liverpool, and people came from all over the world, and it was an amazing birthday. And so to celebrate Stan's 100th birthday, they compiled all of the Bosun's Locker articles into a book, and so that was a very special thing. Yeah. I mean, there's never been anything to equal shanties from the Seven Seas. It stands alone, head and shoulders above everything. There's nearly 400 shanties, I think, in there, in several languages. It's an incredible piece of work, and must have took years. People say that I think he broke his leg or something, and he was laid up for many months. And so he started putting the book together then, and it's a bit similar to what happened now, with the lockdowns. We've been in and out of lockdown for a year now. And so that I started putting my stuff together just, because of that, out of boredom, really. So yeah, there's nothing approaches it. But I mean, there has been some very scholarly work produced. I'm thinking of the lines of Roger Abraham's work with the West Indian shanties in Deep the Water, Shallow the Shore, which was basically a series of essays on shantying in the West Indies. And that brought lots of new material to light. I think recently we've had the Short Sharp shanties, which were the shanties collected in 1914 by Cecil Sharp from John Short of Watchet in Somerset, and Tom Brown down that way has brought out a book of those shanties. There were almost 60 shanties collected, and Sharp said that Short was I think the best singer he ever heard of. And I think your own Helen Crichton, right up to when she died in '89, was producing work and collected quite a lot of shanties in the Nova Scotia area. And so I think Canada has a hand in this. I would like to actually sing next time I sing. I should like to sing one of hers, if that's all right with you. I think in deference to my Canadian hosts, I'd like to sing a shanty collected in Canada. Yeah, I think that there's been some very scholarly work, and there's a few out now. So that are coming. Books that are still coming out. Which are very scholarly, but still, I don't think anything touches Shanties from the Seven Seas. You know, it's still the one book you go to when you want a song, you can't remember the words of a shanty, or you want to learn a new shanty. Where do you go? You don't pick up anybody else's book. You pick up Stan Hugill's book. You know, so I think he was an amazing collector, but I think also you have to pay homage to the people he collected from, because these were not Stan's songs. You know, Stan sang them, but I mean, he got them from great singers. In particular, you know, his friend Harding, who referred to himself as Harding, the Barbadian barbarian, and so Stan did it too. You know, which is not very PC these days, but it was how Harding referred to himself. Tobago Smith and other black shanty singers that Stan sort of attached himself to and got the shanties from, you know. And so practically every other page was, I got this from Harding, you know. So Harding must have been an incredible singer. Yeah, I think the sources as well as the collectors need to be paid homage to.
Yeah.
Have I fully answered that question, or have I gone off?
Yeah, no, that was great.
Yeah.
No, that was great. That was great. Did Stan ever share any stories about Harding with you?
No, not about Harding. The one time I was telling you about when we got incredibly drunk together, this is after a concert, you know. I mean, we came back to my house and sat. We'd already been drinking all night. But I did get him singing some absolutely obscene shanties, which have never been released and never will be. You know, I said, you know, the stuff in the book, it's all been boulderized. You know, you've cleaned them all up. We got some of we sang some of the filthy versions together. And he said, you can't sing them, you know. They're worse than I mean, we have what we call rugby songs over here. I suppose you have hockey songs and football songs, but which are quite filthy. But these were far worse than those. So, you know, you can't sing them in any sort of company. And even, you know, in the years since Stan's book, you know, Stan's book would probably not make print these days because of it's some of the references are.
We do find ourselves having a conversation when we discover new songs and there's lyrics in there or verses in the version that we're referencing. We'll sometimes find ourselves looking at each other and going, all right, like I don't know if we can, I don't feel comfortable singing this, you know?
Yes. Oh, yes.
So no, I'm with you. It's a fine line between presenting the song and respecting the tradition, and then also, you know, being realistic about what's offensive now to people and respecting
and sometimes
that, right?
sometimes it takes you by surprise because you know, I sing with a lot of young people, and sometimes things that I don't feel there's anything wrong with, they point out, you can't sing that, Jim. You know, I mean, I'm thinking of in Lever Johnny Lever, you know, I pray that I may ne'er more see a hungry bitch the likes of she. So I sang this one day and someone said, Jim, you can't sing that.
I think another layer to that too is singing it outside of the initial context, you know, a good 60 years after Stan wrote it down as well. So when Stan was writing it down, he is collecting an accurate portrayal of what he remembers from his shipmates from the Caribbean who are of African descent.
Yes.
And for, you know, for people of our generation to sing that, it is very much outside of the initial context now. So I think that's something we have to be aware of as well.
Oh, yeah, I think so, yeah.
You know, we've spoken to quite a few people who bring either a perspective of, you know, there's a body of work here and that's the tradition and that's kind of the core of it. And then there are others who are saying, you know, you can think of shanties as a living improvisational style of music and call and response. And so it's kind of okay to take it lyrically or musically, you know, into a modern context. Do you
I think songs have always mutated, and when they stop mutating, they'll die. So, you know, if we had insist on singing the original words, nobody would allow us to sing them, and if we did sing them, nobody would want to listen to them. So we have to alter the words, and Stan altered the words quite considerably in his book, you know, and so he didn't put the very offensive words, but even 60 years later, some of the words he used are offensive, so we have to change those as well, and it'll continue like that, you know.
Yeah.
And but I don't think you had to clean them up as much as the Victorians did. I mean, the Victorians cleaned up shanties to a massive extent and made them into sort of parlor songs,
Yeah.
with pianoforte accompaniment, and that would have been quite difficult to haul on a rope and push on a capstan while you're playing the piano, but or the guitar or anything else really.
Yeah.
That's why they're unaccompanied.
Yeah, I'm curious then. So, what do you think? At risk of digressing too much on that, totally with you and agree on the transformation and the mutation of lyrics generation by generation as these songs get handed down. Now, we've encountered the whole tempo discussion a few times on matching the rhythm to what would be a realistic flow of hauling on the lines or marching around the capstan.
Absolutely.
Do you feel that people are singing shanties too fast nowadays?
Yep, Stan Hugill complained about me. That was one of the few times when I got told off, and I sang Donkey Riding, and he said, if you sang it that fast, the bloody capstan would take off like a helicopter. He said, and because I was singing it too fast. But then others have slow. I mean, Stan used to sing Essequibo River. And he used to sing, Essequibo River is the queen of rivers all, Bodhi Tanana, we are somebody, oh. And I thought, that's too fast, so I slowed it right down. Essequibo River is the queen of rivers all, Bodhi Tanana, we are somebody, oh. The tempo does change. But when you're sailing, and I'm sure you guys have done it, it doesn't work with modern equipment. So, the shanties are all sort of, like blow the man down. So it's pull and then hang around for a bit and then pull. And it doesn't work like that at all when you're actually out there on the sea, on a sailing ship. What you want is something that goes pull and pull and pull and pull. And there are not many shanties like that. So I found that when I was sailing, I was using shanties like John Damaray. That was a big popular one because it had the right rhythm. So, aloft you almost go, John come down the backstay through hail and frost and snow. John come down the backstay, John Damaray, John Damaray. John come down the backstay, John Damaray. John come down the backstay, John Damaray. And that's the speed you need on a modern sailing ship to set the sails, And there's always the great story of Lou Killen, who, when he was sailing on the Clearwater, when they on the Hudson, when they were cleaning up the Hudson, and there was the ship the Clearwater, and when he came back to UK, he said to Stan, how come these shanties are so long? They've got lots of verses, and we found that when we were setting the sails on the Clearwater, we only needed about 2 verses at the most, you see. And Dan said, how many people did you have pulling on the ropes? And Lou said, about 30. And Stan said, try it with 3.
Solid. Great.
Now, Jim, you just mentioned the shanty John Damaray there, and that, I have to say, is the first song on the first album of yours with Johnny Collins and Graham Knights that I heard. I think the album was called Good Times.
Oh, yeah.
And so
they're very rare now. We only ran, I don't know, a couple of hundred off, I think.
Is that right?
It's very quickly went out of print. There's none of those now. That's a rarity.
So I was curious about how you got singing with Johnny and with Graham, if you could tell us a bit more about that.
I started singing with Johnny in 75, and so I just moved down to London in the summer of 75, and this was probably the first festival. I think I moved down in the May, and this was in June, mid-June, because it was Berkshire Midsummer Folk Festival. So it was on the midsummer weekend, or the nearest weekend to the midsummer. So I was at this festival, and this guy came not running, but stomping across the campsite field towards me. And he says, you're Jim Mageean, that shanty singer from up north. I said, yeah. And he said, I'm Johnny Collins. I said, oh yeah, I've heard of you. And he'd heard of me and I'd heard of him. He said, I heard you on the radio. He says, you were singing Old Muck picking on a banjo and you're singing it wrong. And and he was quite right. So he pointed out that I was singing the shanty wrong. And but I was kind of singing a bass line for the tune, and so anyway, we got over it, and that was how we got together. And then we realised he'd just moved into London as well, both in like northwest London. And so he said, "Oh, why don't you come round to my house and we'll sing some shanties and songs and that, and maybe do some gigs." And which is what we did, to sing together. And then we started getting a few gigs, So I sang with them for 35 years, and from 75 right up to 1990. 2009, when he died. I was with him when he died, of course, in Poland. We were on tour. We just finished the tour. It was just finished the last gig, and then we came home. We sang Old Maui in the taxi going home. For the Polish taxi driver asked us if we knew Old Maui. It's a huge shanty in Poland. So we did, and then we got back to the hotel, and Johnny said he didn't feel very well. Anyway, I called him an ambulance. Well, we didn't call an ambulance because the ambulance was going to take too long. So got a taxi eventually and got him into hospital, but he died a couple of hours later, we were together on the road for 35 years. We toured of Canada and America and all over Europe. And we did lots of amazing things together. And he was a fantastic singer, had a wonderful voice. He just harmonised away, you could pitch the song any way you liked, and he would harmonise to it. And he was a great bloke, a great singer and a great bloke. And I hope people say that about me when I'm dead, but I think that's as good an accolade as you can get. And anyway, so we had a great time together. But then Johnny worked with other people as well, as I worked with other people. He worked with various other singers as well. And he worked with Tom Lewis for a while. Tom and him go back even further than me and Johnny, so they go back a very long way. And he sang with lots of people. But as I say, we had great times. And Johnny wouldn't have wanted to be an old man. He always said he wanted to die on stage, but it wasn't far off. Just a few hours after coming off stage. But he was. He's much remembered, and we have a concert here for him every year. On round about the time of his death, we have a Johnny Collins concert, and we tend to have unaccompanied singers, that Johnny preferred unaccompanied songs, and so we've had some really good concerts in the last few years. Of course, last year we had to do it on Zoom, and I think this year we'll probably have to do it on Zoom as well. But we will still go ahead and have the Johnny Collins concert. So,
Well, it's I think a testament to the impact he made that we also have an annual Johnny Collins Sing here in Canada, out in Cambridge as well. So that's kept going. I know you've been over for that way back when. But it's still going in his memory.
Oh right, yeah.
Well, we do hope that when things aren't so weird, we can get on a plane and over there and join you for one of those Johnny Collins Sings. And it's just wonderful. Yeah, wonderful for the work that you do to continue the work and the tradition. I know my one of my mentors in tech says that we just, as you get into it and you start working, you stand on we stand on the shoulders of giants. And the giants are just those people that come before us that have put all of those years into building up the work and the body of work, and you learn from them and you work from them, and then eventually you're the giant that has taken on everything that they have done, and you have all that knowledge and all that capability to pass that on. So now that's you. And here we are standing
Well, it's very
with
nice
you
of you to say so, but
trying to soak in a little bit of that ourselves. So
well, I do try to pass it on, pass on the tradition and pass on the shanties. I did just before I retired completely. I did 3 years teaching on the folk music degree here in Newcastle. We had the first folk music degree in the UK, and so I was involved on that and taught quite a few new singers and to sing shanties and other songs. So I did a bit of that, and then I've worked with quite a lot of young people, here in the north, and at the moment my partner's children are the Unthanks. They have toured. They have been to Toronto. They have toured over there.
Yep.
Anyway, they're very big over this in the UK. And they have what they call singing weekends and winter singing weekends, and they have about 10 a year, and they're vastly oversubscribed. We take about 50 people at a time, and there's a waiting list of about 500. And then we go off singing with them up in the wilds of Northumberland, at the sea, of course. And we walk on the beach and we sing in the pub, and we have concerts and we do sing-arounds and we do workshops and we cook food and we do great things. And I always pass on, I use those weekends to pass on my shanties to the unthanks, and they have recorded quite a few of them, John Dead in particular. And anyway, and then we sing them at the singing weekends. We've got great favourites that still want to hear Down Trinidad and Pull Down Below and non-shanties. They won't even let you out of the pub without singing Chicken on a Raft, and that's the bar staff. That's not the singers. It's the bar staff that won't let me leave the pub until I've sung Chicken on a Raft these days. But basically, the kids just want to know the tunes, they want to know the words, and then they take away and run with them. As has happened recently around the world with the big shanty explosion on the media.
Well, Jim, to go back to Cambridge, Ontario, and this concept of passing these songs on to the next generation, I have to say I was at the Millrace Folk Festival, which unfortunately no longer exists. It was a great folk festival in Cambridge, Ontario, put on by Brad McEwen, and really, really wonderful festival. And my first time ever there, I was playing fiddle with a flamenco guitar player who used to be a teacher of mine when I was studying music at a university. And I sort of nipped off in between sets, and I ended up at the Kiwi pub. And I have to say, this was a life-altering moment to me, and I'm not exaggerating whatsoever. I can say there's two musical life-altering moments for me, which was the first of which was hearing the Chieftains when I was about 12, and just the impact of hearing Irish music, and it in that moment just making me realize I want to be a fiddle player. And then here I am at 24 years old, and or 25, I suppose, and I walk into the Kiwi pub, and I see you and Johnny Collins and Graham singing in the corner, and all around is I see Morris dancers, all of them with tankards or pints in their hands. And I just stopped in my tracks, and I was like, what is this? It was surround sound harmony and shanties and folk songs, and it just floored me. And I stayed as long as I could. I remember I had to run to my next set with this flamenco guitar player. Oh, right. And I got to the side stage just on time, and he said, "Oh, I wasn't sure if you were showing up. Where were you?" But I was in an important place at the time. And it really, I have to say, I'm not exaggerating whatsoever, that moment changed my life. And I have to thank you very, very much for that. And I also wanted to touch on something else that you mentioned earlier. You said you were growing up in the northeast of England and you were exposed to other folk songs, but it was really just shanties that did it for you and made you want to sing. And I have to say for myself too, I was, playing music in Irish pubs over the years, mainly as a fiddle player. And I would sing the occasional song when my good friend Michael O'Grady, whose birthday it is actually today, incidentally, he would pop outside for a cigarette or whatnot. He'd say, "All right, Jimmy, sing us a song or something." So I was doing folk songs now and then. And I must also add that Richard and I went to a choir school. And as much as I'm very grateful for that training, once I graduated, I had no real interest in singing in a choir. I didn't have a particular interest in singing. To some extent, I enjoyed singing folk songs and bluegrass and Irish songs. But when I heard your album and that experience in the Kiwi pub, it just made me realize in that moment, this is something I want to do. And I don't know that I know why that is, but I was curious that you were mentioning something kind of similar, that you were exposed to these other folk songs, but there was something about the shanties that really made you want to sing. I'm
not quite sure. I actually sang other songs before I sang shanties. My first big hit was Lavender's Blue, which I learned from my granny when I was 2. And so when I was a child, when everybody asked me to sing a song, I would sing Lavender's Blue, which is a 400-year-old English folk song, and then when I was about 7, my family, I came from an Irish background family, and so they had parties, hoolies, whatever you want to call them, and so whenever they had one of these parties, which were invariably in my parents' house because they had children, so all these people used to come back from the pub and sing, and I learned from quite an early age that when all these drunk people came back, you got sent to bed. but that if you sang a song, they would let you stay up. You see, and so my brother never twigged it. He never sang, and so I started singing songs. And what I sang was the local songs that you've got this ridiculous title of being Geordie, because we stayed loyal to King George in the three Jacobite rebellions. Since all around us in Northumberland, there were Jackies, there were Jacobites, but in the city of Newcastle, they remained loyal to King George. So we were Geordies, so they would knock on your door, the soldiers, and say, "Oh, you a Jack? You're a Geordie." And of course, you said you were a Geordie, otherwise they shot you. So so this was where the Geordies came from. So there's lots of music from this area, basically because Newcastle was one of the centres of publishing. Basically, there was lots of publishing places, but Edinburgh, London, and Newcastle were the three main centres, going back to the 17th century. And so because we published the songs, they stayed here. So places like Yorkshire, which is a huge place, very, very few folk songs collected, very, very few collections of songs. There's Manchester and places like that, you know. But because Newcastle was a centre of printing, so I started singing those songs, the local songs first. And because I came from a mining community, I didn't sing mining songs at that time, but I did learn lots of songs later. And I suppose it was just this sort of the experience of the folk club and hearing Lou and Johnny singing these shanties, you know, one after another in this great explosion, that it just made it welled up at you, and you've just, this is what I like, this is what I've got to do. And it was suddenly you'd found what, you know, a kind of purpose. If I'm going to learn a song, I'm going to learn those songs. Those songs are great, you know. And heard lots of other fine songs, but they never grabbed you like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's something in the expression or the intent or the energy behind the shanties that I think it communicates more than just the notes or the words do somehow.
And they're very simple, you know. I mean, 99% of them are in major keys. You know, you don't need to be a great singer to sing them, and they're work songs, and so you can actually go out on a boat and do it, you know, and say, "Oh, this is how it works." And if you go out to Misty Port, you can work on the capstan, and you can work on the huge break windlass that they've got there, which I worked on a couple of years ago. It was incredible. It's so difficult to sing while you do it, you know. So I found that out a couple of years ago, the last time I was at Mystic. Yeah.
Well, one thing I've thought of in the past is Stan, his vocal delivery and those sort of hitches that he throws in. To me, he's got what I like to call the saltiest voice of the sea shanty.
Yeah, but he got those from Harding. You see,
that's right.
Harding,
that's right.
Not that I ever heard Harding, but Stan says in his book, you know, that Harding put all of these yelps and hitches into his shanties, and that's what Stan did. So I'm sure he tried to recreate what he'd heard. He'd heard Harding, this wonderful man, singing these great shanties with all the hitches. And so he wanted to do that as well, you know.
Yeah, well, that's true. I don't think I can think of anyone else that's really thrown in hitches like Stan has. But I think in a way he's the most authentic recreation or representation of what the shanties might have sounded like. But for my money, I really think that your trio with Johnny Collins and Graham Knights, that to me, those are the pinnacle of what I like to listen to when it comes to shanties. And I know Stefan and Tim
pass that on to Graham.
Yeah, I absolutely mean it. And I know that Stefan and Tim were mentioning something
I was just
similar.
singing with Graham at last weekend. We did a concert, a charity concert.
And let's talk about your other lockdown project as well, because you mentioned the books, and I'm going to show them here. So we've got Heave Away, Haul Away, and Sail Away. And astute, anyone who's watching this on video will probably, if they're astute, will recognize the image on the front of each of them as that painting behind you. But tell us a little bit about the books and about the impetus behind them and what you're trying to get across with them.
So what happened a year ago was I decided, after I'd done the various DIY jobs that needed doing in the house and things, and you think, what on earth am I going to do now? And we can't go out. We're not allowed out apart from a short exercise, I think they said, maximum 1 hour or something a day, within a 5-mile radius. And so we're quite stuck. So I thought, right, I'm going to put all my shanties together. I'll start doing that. So I'd started this project years ago, but it never got anywhere with it. So I produced this. So this is my shanty collection. It's called Shanties and 4-Bitters, Jim Mageean. and in it is all of the handwritten shanties and four-bitters, and there are over 300. So anyway, and I finished it. So that was the first few months of lockdown, taking up, and so then I started the show. Then we had a pause in the lockdown between lockdown 1 and lockdown 2, and so people were allowed to come to the house again. And so I saw my kids and my partner's kids, so Becky and Rachel Unthank, and all of them and my partner impressed on me, oh, you should publish this. And I thought, oh, no, you can't do that. You know, there's over 300 songs, over 300 shanties there. And I don't write music. I don't read music or write music, so I couldn't do that part of it. And so it was quite complicated. So anyway, we talked around it with people, and they said, well, you know, you could produce, to produce the music on CD, so you don't need to have the music notation written down, and you know you can, and plus what that book hasn't got, which the new books have, is notes. So anyway, I got sort of browbeaten, for want of a better word, into decided to try to produce the songs, you see, the shanties. So I started off with, I said, well, I'll take the hauling shanties, and I've got lots of, went through all the recordings. I've got old tapes and recordings going back to the 1970s of me singing with Johnny, singing with other people, you know. Anyway, so I gathered all the hauling ones together and produced Haul Away with the CD inside, and then, you know, put it out. And then my partner said, well, how many are you going to get? And I said, I think I was going to get 50. So she was quite shocked, and she said, you want 50? And I said, no, I think 50 will be enough, you know. And anyway, she persuaded me to get 100. And so we're now up to 700. And anyway, so people then, I've never advertised it, you know, I've never put it out there. Graham mentioned it on his Facebook page, but that was not by, I didn't ask him to, he just did it without my approval. So, and then by word of mouth, mostly, people found out about it, and I started to send them all over. They've gone to New Zealand and Australia and Canada, as you know, and America, and all over Europe and that. And anyway, so then I thought, right, I'll do the heaving shanties. So then I brought out Heave Away with all the heaving shanties in that I had recordings of. Of course, there's lots more. And then after I finished that, I just decided to do the four-bitters, and so I brought out Sail Away, which started off just being the four-bitters, but then I thought I needed to bring it up to date and add some songs from the modern Merchant Navy and modern Royal Navy. So there's just a smattering there, 3 or 4 of more modern songs from those. And so so it's basically four-bitters and other sea songs. Some weeks I get so many orders I just can't keep up, you know. I'm really pleased with the way they're going. You know, I don't know what we do next, but the project's over, as you know, as far as that's concerned, and I just hope they do some good and get more people singing shanties, and you know. So,
and if anyone watching or listening wants to, grab a copy or find out more, is there somewhere we can point them?
Just through my email. My email is shanty_jim@hotmail.com. shanty_jim@hotmail.com, and I can, you know, it is quite expensive to send them out to Canada. I sell the books for about £10, UK, Europe, and I charge a bit more for Canada, and especially USA. USA is even more expensive than Canada to post things to. And of course, you've got to fill in all sorts of customs documentation and all sorts of stuff. But anyway, yes, I'm very happy to send more out to Canada, but and America. But at the minute, I've just got through all of my UK and European orders this weekend, so it's just cleared the books, cleared the decks. I've just cleared the decks and ready to start again. But yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the mining songs and then sort of northeast of England.
Okay, yeah. Like you, James, I come from a mining background. I'm the first male member of my family on either side, father's side and mother's side, to not go down a mine as far as long as I can trace back. And I can trace, you know, certainly back into the 1700s, but some links of the family I can get back to the 1500s. And
Wow.
every male member of my family has been a miner, and many of them killed in the mine. My own grandfather was killed in the mine, and that's my grandmother's. When she'd only been 5 years. My mother was 5 years old, and they brought his body home in a wheelbarrow, and she was furious because they hadn't washed him. He was covered in blood and coal dust. She was furious that they hadn't washed him. And the mines were privately owned then, you see, and she got no compensation from the mine. So my mother was an only child and 5-year-old and lost her father, and so I've recently come across photographs of them from time, and my grandmother, even though she was only 30 years old, and she looks ancient, because she just lost her husband and she was bereft, so anyway, so I had a huge family background. My father was a miner, and we lived in a mining village, and in the 40s and 50s, the miners came home black. They didn't have pithead baths, so they came home dirty. So my father used to come down the lane along with other miners, and a lot of the kids who didn't have fathers who were miners would run away and screaming because these black men were coming down the street, covered in coal dust. And so my mother, we had a bathroom upstairs, but my mother wouldn't let my father go in the bath until he'd been in the tin bath in front of the fire. You have to go in the tin bath, and then she would wash all the coal dust off him in this, this zinc bath, and then he was allowed to go upstairs to the proper bath and have a proper bath. And that was every day, well, that's 6 days a week anyway, because they worked on Saturdays. And those days. And it was only after the nationalisation of the mines that they brought in pithead baths, where the miners could actually have a bath or a shower before they came home. So that was well into the mid-50s before that happened here. Yeah.
It was incredibly difficult work, and there's a song that you sing, and I believe the last couple lines are, "I'll fight in your armies, I'll go out to sea, but I'll not let you make a coal miner of me."
Yes, that's right, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, there's some fantastic mining songs, and we sing Miner's Lifeguard, Miner's Life. It was like a sailor's. And I think they had the toughest jobs because they lost their lives on a daily basis, and still do. The fishermen around here, I live in a fishing village, and the fishermen are still losing their lives. I think there was 9 died last year in this area. So, that it's not just a hard life, it's a dangerous life as well. And, yeah.
So my grandfather was born in Consett in Durham, and he was the only one of his all his brothers to not be a miner. And the way he got out of it was actually by joining the French Christian Brothers when he was quite young, who sent him off to, I forget if it was Jersey or Guernsey initially, and then over to Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, where he was the only one in his family to get an education, and the rest of his brothers ended up down the pit. Yeah. And one of them, as you mentioned, it was private companies back then. And one of them developed emphysema pretty badly. Of course, they're underground all the time, and in the northeast of England, you don't get a ton of sunlight in the wintertime as well. So you're kind of, in these very squalid conditions all the time. And so he was examined by the company doctor, who said, "Oh, there's no indication that this has anything to do with all these years that he spent underground." So it was very
they did. No, it was years after my father died. He died quite young. Years later, I was getting phone calls, and I said, "Well, no, my dad died of a heart attack. I can't, say hand on heart that he died because of the work in the pit, but it probably was related, But I didn't. But as I say, in the early days, they didn't even recognise black lung as they've done with asbestosis in the shipyards around here as well. It was just accepted that shipyard workers died of asbestosis. It's only now that they're getting compensation for it. But yes, it was a hard life. Yeah.
So Jim, just one more quickly on the book itself. The cover and the artwork was done by your son Joby, but the painting here is based on that painting behind you. Can you tell us a little bit about that painting?
The sketches on the back of the book as well were all by Stan, and the one on Sail Away was just done again uniquely for me. But Joby took the painting and made it, made a copy and for the covers of the book. So I got this as a birthday present in 1975 when I was 27, and it's been on my wall ever since. And I'm very, very proud of it. And it's called the South Spainer Shortening Sail, because Stan told me that ships from the Tyne, that were going a long way south, that is down towards the equator, would be referred to locally as South Spainers because they were going past Spain. And so he said, "Oh, I'll paint you one called the South Spainer," he says. And then he asked about how I wanted it rigged in full sail. And I said, "Oh, no, I don't want it in full sail." Because you see, paintings of ships in full sail, you know, with the stunsails out and everything like that, I think they're more artistic of things. But anyway, so he painted me one of shortening sail. So they're taking in the sail. And because you can see there's a gale blowing up over to the left there on the picture. So it's got the atmosphere. You know that there's a big gale coming, so they're having to take sail in and shorten the sail. So anyway, so it was as I say, he was a great friend, and it was great that he painted this for me. And there's lots of other people around the world that own some of Stan's paintings. But I hope one day that they hang one in the an Academy of Marine Art in London. And so Stan's always hoped that they would hang one of his pictures in there one day. But I mean, there's lots of stuff in his house. There's a wonderful painting on the wall in his house where his widow Bron still lives, you know, in Aberdyfi in Wales. And he painted it on a bedsheet in a prisoner of war camp when he was prisoner of war in Germany. And it's a fantastic painting. It's a picture of Captain Henry Morgan's sacking of Panama City. And there's all these pirates with half-naked wenches over their shoulders and booze in their hands, raping and pillaging in Panama, the cup of gold, you know. And yeah, he put on a play to that effect when he was in prisoner of war camp. And one of his fellow prisoners turned up at one of the concerts we did once. Very emotional reunion because they hadn't seen each other since 1945. And he said he owed everything to Stan because Stan had got him involved in singing and putting and acting and doing these plays that Stan used to put on, you know, just to keep them all occupied. And he says, and now I'm a professional actor. And he says, when I came home, I gave up my job and became an actor. And he says, I owe it all to this man, you know. I mean, he spoke, and as I've told many people, you know, he spoke, I think, 12 languages. And all self-taught because he left school at 14. So he had no education to speak of, you know.
Yeah, actually, that's only the second time I've heard of this story. The first time was at Mystic a few years ago. And I'd be curious to follow up a little bit on this because I think what I'd heard independently of that was that Stan was captured in Singapore during the war. So I was kind of curious. And then I did hear the story that he had painted a background. I'd heard it was for a Pirates of Penzance play. Maybe this is a similar story, or maybe this is a different story.
No. I think it was a play about Henry Morgan, about the
Morgan.
sacking of Panama.
Okay. And another thing, another angle I'd heard was that it was a Japanese prisoner of war camp.
No, he was in a German prisoner of war camp. And I've never heard the Singapore angle before. Because I lost an uncle in Singapore, in the defence of Singapore back in 41, is it? Okay. And no, I'm sure it was over this side, but he was captured by the Germans, and he spent 3 or 4 years in prisoner of war camp.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm sure that I know the story's true about the bedsheet, and say Bron still has it, and the Imperial War Museum want it, but you won't let them have it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Wow. Well, Jim, that I think we could have done a double or a triple episode here on this one with you, and I gotta say this has brought back a ton of memories of being back at the Endeavour with you and in Whitby, and certainly has me pining to be in a real pub, shoulder to shoulder, go across the pond and
pining to be pinting.
And I'm pining for some pinting, and some shanty,
real beer.
So yeah, no, it was such a real pleasure to have you with us here today. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be with you, and it's great to see you guys again, and great to meet you for the first time, Tim.
You as well.
Yeah, that was great. So if you don't mind, we just love to get out of here with a song. So
right. Well, I thought
over to you.
I was pondering what to sing, and I should sing something with a link to Canada. And to my knowledge, it's the only shanty that was ever collected from women. There's been shanties collected by women, because lots of the shanty collect, but this is collected from women. And so her source, Helen Crichton's source, got it from women who were singing it on Grand Turk Island in the Turks Islands, and they were walking up and down a gangplank, unloading a ship, unloading the ballast and the cargo on their heads, up and down this gangplank, singing this shanty, and which I think that makes it quite unique to be a shanty collected from women, and so and Canadian at that. So, but of course, like lots of the shanties, Helen Crichton, or the collector, had only written down one verse. And so it was left to Joy Bennett of the Johnson Girls to put some more verses to it. So they're one of my favourite shanty groups, along with yourselves. But I think the Johnson Girls are a fantastic shanty group, and so we owe a bit to Joy as well. So I'd like to sing Brandy-O. Brandy good for sailor man, Brandy-O, early in the morning. Brandy-O, early in the morning, give us a drop of brandy, brandy good for sailor man, Brandy-O. Shore leave good for sailor man, shore leave-o, early in the morning, shore leave-o, early in the morning. Give us a drop of brandy, shore leave good for sailor man, shore leave-o. Drinking good for sailor man, drinking-o, early in the morning, drinking-o, early in the morning. Give us a drop of brandy, drinking good for sailor man, drinking-o. Dancing good for sailor man, dancing-o, early in the morning, dancing-o, early in the morning. Give us a drop of brandy, dancing good for sailor man, dancing-o. Loving good for sailor man, loving-o, early in the morning, loving-o, early in the morning. Give us a drop of brandy, loving good for sailor man, loving-o. Brandy good for sailor man, brandy-o, early in the morning, brandy-o, early in the morning. Give us a drop of brandy, brandy good for sailor man, brandy-o.
That was a great one.
That was fantastic. That was really good. I called dibs on that one.
Pressed on the trigger there, Rich.
We should take it back to Canada. It's where it started, in Nova Scotia, Halifax, Nova Scotia, 1952.
I'm overdue for a trip to Halifax. I will proudly sing it there. Yep, call shotgun on that one for sure there. Sorry, guys.
Jim, thanks again. I know we went probably quite a bit longer than we expected to, but that was just such an enjoyable conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Great seeing you all again.
Yeah.
You too, Jim.
Yeah,
Thanks so much
Thank
for
you
the
so
time.
much.
All the best, mate. So
Yeah.
long.
Right,
Bye
Thanks,
now.
Jim. Bye-bye.
Well, that was a really enjoyable interview, and thanks again to Jim for spending so much time with us and joining us from overseas. If you've enjoyed the show, if you like what we're doing here, please like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. We're always looking for suggestions and recommendations about what you want to hear and about how we can improve the show. And with all of that said and done, guys, thanks so much for being here. And thanks to everyone out there for listening or watching. And we will see you next time.
The undead grey goose gone home, and the fox in the way of the morning. The undead grey goose gone home, and the fox in the way of the morning. Who'll dig his grave? Grey goose gone home, and the fox in the way of the morning. fox in the way of the morning. Who'll make his shroud? Grey goose gone home, and the fox in the way of the morning. Hunted. Grey goose gone home, and the fox in the way of the morning. We'll lower him down. Grey goose gone home, and the fox in the way of the morning. Hunted. Grey goose gone home, and the fox in the way of the morning. We'll toll the bell. Grey goose gone home, and the fox in the way of the morning. Hunted. Grey goose gone home, and the fox in the way of the morning. Hunted. Grey goose gone home, and the fox in the way of the morning.